There's no shame on failing. Even going to your first engineer hires and being like, guys, I'm a new manager. I'm learning. Help me learn and let's learn on this whole thing together. Having that mindset helped me a lot to even get trust out of my engineers.
Today's guest is Ariel Ades, former co-founder and CTO at TBM Labs and former senior engineering manager at iConnections and Holonic. With 25 plus years in engineering leadership, he shares how he leads high-performing remote-first teams.
When a new hire comes in, it's not just the new hire learning about the company, it's the company learning to work about the new hire. And people need to understand that in the workplace, no one's expected to be perfect, or at least on a startup environment. But they usually come with the mindset that I need to be perfect, I can't make a mistake, I can't screw up. It's never that smooth. Once you have a bigger team, it kind of adapts. But when you're starting, it's definitely not like that.
How do you help a team that has failed and not make them feel like that is who they are?
There are a couple of elements. One was
Welcome back to another episode of the dark arts of software engineering team optimization. I'm Franz Aliquo, and this is my co-host Kyle Johnson. We're the founders of Holonic, and we build engineering teams that actually function for startups by combining agile training with psychology, neuroscience, and somatics. This is our show about what really makes teams tick. Today, we're diving deep into the evolution of a builder. With over 25 years navigating the high-stakes world of engineering leadership, from the early days of serverless architecture to scaling global systems in the fintech and healthcare spaces. He was the ground zero engineer at a fintech startup where he had to architect not just the code, but the entire culture from scratch. He's also a Mensa member who uses that analytical horsepower to solve the most complex puzzle in tech, the human one. He's a pioneer in Nearshore team building and distributed pods, having scaled teams 3 times across borders. But perhaps most importantly, he's a leader who stared down the barrel of startup failure and come out the other side with a refined philosophy on resilience, career pivots, and what it actually takes to build something that lasts. Joining us to talk about the 0 to 1 journey and strategic advantage of global talent and the hard-won lessons from the trenches of startup life, please welcome Ariel Ades.
Pleasure to be here.
Thanks for spending time with us and being willing to get into these hairy conversations about what makes things great. I guess I'd like to start maybe like at kind of the beginning, like with a blank slate, as it were. You were the first engineer at a fintech startup. In terms of kind of the dark arts of team building, we often talk about architecting success rather than just hiring talent, right? Like there's a lot more beyond the resume that's relevant. So I guess first question kind of kick this off is, for you, what was the first kind of cultural cornerstone that you laid down before taking in your first hire?
Sure. So it always in my mind goes back to why we're building something. And what I mean by that is being the first one also meant I had to understand what we were building. No one would come in and say, hey, create this code, create this interface. They literally had a problem that needed solving. And creating this culture within understanding the problem, getting the whys before the what we are doing became a core value. And it actually is what I believe pushed us forward that quickly and helped us create. So when I hired my first engineer, it wasn't just any engineer. It was someone that came from a product background. He also understood the product and what was going on. He had actually suffered through the problem that we were solving. So once that happened, everything made more sense and he was able to move by his own. And then the whole team was learning from that.
Was there something kind of in the hiring process that you optimized for kind of beyond the resume and experience? Like in terms of what were you looking for in the person that you were hiring?
So there are a couple of elements. And one was, I'm going to call it a weird one, but we did kind of like logics test So we had a bunch of like basic. One of them was like, if you're playing Russian roulette and then you have a bullet and then you swap the position that you had, like kind of almost like game theory. Purpose was literally to understand if this person was able to understand complex problems and explain their way through it. It also helped to filter out people that were just like great resumes, but in like when you throw into the hot mess that was a startup, they'll be able to make sense of everything that was happening. And the second element was really, again, someone, especially at the beginning, someone that understood the pain that we were solving. It didn't have to go through the actual pain. So a lot of people had high empathy with the issue, that the problem that was being solved. So when they, for example, when we got our first customer, we all celebrated, and it was a true celebration because they had this understanding of the product and the problem that was being solved.
That's really cool. And I guess, like, did everything go smoothly from kind of the first hire as you scaled, or did you kind of come into ultimately kind of find some hurdles?
Oh, it's never smooth, at least on my experience. That's one thing that a lot of people, I think, get wrong. When a new hire comes in, it's not just the new hire learning about the company, it's the company learning to work about the new hire. And new hires usually come in thinking, oh, they know me, I'm gonna get a good leadership, they're gonna understand all my issues. And it's never that smooth. Once you have a bigger team, it kind of adapts because of the hurdle or the herd that is in there that helps people to adapt. But when you're starting, it's definitely not like that. So I've had, and what I'm talking about right now is also part of my learning process. So my second and my third engineers didn't fit very well at the beginning. They were very technical. They were very fast builders, but they wouldn't understand the problem. So we had to work with them to get them back into this position.
And I guess you came into this without really any prior startup or management experience, yeah?
Yeah, I manage a small team, but it wasn't anything near as complex and as fun as well, but mostly complex as this one.
Like, I guess looking back, what was, I guess, the hardest lesson you learned in that process by kind of, I guess, doing it the wrong way?
And as cheesy as this might sound, is making mistakes fast and then learning faster from those mistakes and fixing them. So, as you mentioned, I've failed plenty of times. I've recently failed on a startup. There's no shame on failing. There's no shame on even going to your first engineer hires and being like, guys, I'm a new manager. I'm learning. Help me learn and let's learn on this whole thing together, rather than being the one that knows it all and then obviously is going to fail just the same as everyone. So having that mindset helped me a lot to even get trust out of my engineer.
I think it's like in that same kind of idea of failure, like, how do you help a team that has failed not kind of take that as, how do you take a team that's failed and not make them feel like that is who they are? You know what I mean?
Yep. And honestly, I don't think there is a magic formula, but what I've learned is talking to them about my own failures as well. People need to understand that in the workplace, no one's expected to be perfect, or at least on a startup environment, no one's expected to be perfect. But they usually come with the mindset that I need to be perfect, I can't make a mistake, I can't screw up. So if their manager, if their leader comes in and say, hey guys, welcome to the team, we have failed with A, B, and C, now we're trying D. It already creates a precedent where they identify, and when they do fail, because no matter how good you are, you're gonna make a mistake eventually. They don't feel obligated to hide it or to pretend that nothing happened. They can just add one to the mix, add one failure to the mix, and discuss and learn more openly without the fear of, I screwed up, I'm gonna get fired.
Yeah, I feel like that's a thing that, not a ton of places really are open in terms of accepting and discussing failure, right?
Yeah.
Like, I think a lot of times failure happens and you have, your kind of meeting where you said, okay, what went wrong? And then you move on. But at the same time, it's not like an acceptance that failure is actually part of the process, right? Like with failure, you're learning. And I think, at least for me, right, and kind of how we do stuff at Holonic, I feel like failure, the worst thing that happens is making the same mistake twice, because it means you didn't learn from the first one.
And I've been through places that institutionalized post-mortem, for example. So every project you're going to have a post-mortem. And that kind of misses the point, in my opinion, because now it's just like another mandatory meeting. No one expects to learn from it. Most people will be working throughout the meeting in parallel. So it becomes like it takes all the failure needs to hurt a little bit because you have to learn from that. It can be just another autopilot kind of deal that a lot of people and a lot of places institutionalized and repeat that as in it's a mantra. Oh, if I do a postmortem, I'll understand. I'll never make this mistake again. Not if that's just like a repeat every end of sprint kind of event. They can be very effective, though.
Comes another meeting.
Exactly. They can be very effective if they have a meaning.
If the meeting has a meaning.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I guess like that's kind of, I feel like that's also a way to help kind of reduce burnout and stress if people really see that not as a meeting and a thing you have to do, but as a part of the learning process, a part of their own kind of career development.
100%.
And I think it's easier. Sorry, go on.
No, you can finish. Sorry.
I was going to say, I think it's easier at the beginning, right, of stuff. But like when you're working on a project rather, for so long, sometimes that energy starts waning, right?
Yeah.
So I guess like, how do you manage to keep that sort of energy alive through the longer term, as opposed to kind of when people are just jumping on a project, very excited to do it, new hire, everything's great. And then come day 1000.
And that's circling a little bit back to the purpose. So understanding the why we're doing something, this for me is one of the keys. So giving that startup as an example, just briefly, before the startup was created, our users option was loan sharks, literal loan sharks, the one that would break your legs if you don't pay them. So as we started to build a new product, it wasn't the greatest product at first. It was far from it. It was a little bit better than a loan shark. And then if we failed, at least we're still better than the option previous to that. And then we launch, and then we keep developing, and then we're going to hit another failure point. But looking at what we accomplished from the last checkpoint to the current checkpoint and seeing that even though we made mistakes, we failed, something bad happened, we're still going the right direction and improving, usually makes a lot of people be happy again with the failure. It's a joke, but we were better than a loan shark. We're probably the worst system out there, but when we launched, but we were better than the other option. And that only happens, or not only, but that's why it's very important for the team to understand what we're solving. Because if they didn't, they would just look at the software and be like, oh, this is not working, and it's never like, this sucks. I like to... This is actually a fun story if we have time for it.
Oh, yeah, we have as much time as we want.
So on this platform, we had a two-factor login. So you put in an email. Well, it was a one-time password, actually. So you put in your email, get a token on your email or SMS. You could choose it. And then you log in. We had Lucky Orange running, so we could monitor whoever was going to be on the website with like bells and dings and everything, so we could actually watch it. And I swear to God, the first user that came in, got into the platform, typed in his email, asked for a token. The token took maybe 30 seconds to arrive. So in the meantime, he typed in his email again and generated a new token. And back then, I was just generating a new token every request. I wouldn't store the old one. So when the first email got, or the first token got there, he'll try to go in, failed, invalid. Then he'll go back and generate a new one. And by that time, the second one would get in. And you can imagine the entire company. So what happened on the our end? A user came in, Lucky Orange started to throwing bells, and everyone jumped into my computer, and we were all watching the user on a big screen and look at the behavior and be like, oh no, he's not gonna click on that again. Wait, come on, just give it a second, and then he'd get another token. And that was for about 5 minutes, and he left. So our first user ever failed on the first experience. That was, now it's a fun story, but back then it was devastating. I was heartbroken that he didn't even get to see my platform in action and everything that we built in action. I took a ton of learning from there, and one of them was going back to the team and being like, do we know what happened? It was an older guy. He was probably at his 65, 7-year-old. Did we plan for that? No, we didn't. What can we do? How can we make this change fast enough so we can even call him? And we actually did, and be like, hey, come back tomorrow. It'll be fixed by tomorrow, kind of deal. And showing that to the team was actually, for me, and when I say team, it's not even just the engineering team. It was all the stakeholders, all the full combo of the 8 of us worked there, but that was the entire company back then. We were all watching that and learning how to deal with failure in real time, and seeing how we can take that as a positive lesson, or just be like, okay, this failed, this is never going to work out, and let that drag us down.
Right.
Having that notion again that we were a little bit better still than a loan shark, let's push it forward. I don't care what it takes. Let's keep going and keep moving the right direction.
Right. And ultimately, that's one failure that has a fix, right? You've broken the system, and now you fix it. Now that something else is going to break down the line.
Exactly. And it can be from the idea of the product, from all the way to just a button that's not working. It doesn't, the scale matters, but it's not the only thing that matters. How big is the failure? It still needs to be a learning out of it and actionable post-mortem out of it. So, just using that as an example, from that day on, I've never made OTPs that expire. They all have 2, 3, 5 minutes out of it. I'm never gonna forget that, ever. So that's just one lesson that you can take out of just experience like that.
I'm curious, did he log back in the next day? And did you also broadcast that again to the team?
Yes. So he actually took a couple of days to log back in. He did actually go through the whole system and was a successful user. We were all watching, and we really had a good customer support team, especially in the beginning. That's, for a startup, that's something very important. Our CS called him afterwards, thanked him, celebrated with him. That's another thing. We would call the customers out when they were done, and the whole company would hear the little celebrations and get feedback, real-time feedback out of that experience.
Nice. Love it.
Awesome.
I'd like to kind of switch gears a little bit here, and kind of focus more on your experience with the teams, right? Specifically the nearshore aspect, the teams that you've worked with and helped build. I feel like you were doing that before it was probably quite as popular. Everybody kind of knows the term nowadays and is a little more used to working in that capacity, I feel like, especially post-COVID. But I think a lot of leaders still see a nearshore team mostly as a cost-saving measure, right? And in many circumstances, they probably often associate it with, you're also going to see kind of like a trade-off, right? You get what you pay for, you're going to save some money, but maybe not as good of talent, maybe not as good of team dynamics, maybe not as good as culture. So I would like to know, are there any specific cultural multipliers, let's call them, or something specific that you've found, right, with your nearshore teams that maybe non-distributed teams are lacking?
Yeah, of course. I think there are plenty of things, but I can focus on a couple that I feel that are very important. So one of them is that compromise that you mentioned. And yes, I see that a lot. what I think most people fail to understand, or most hiring managers and companies fail to understand, is I believe they're looking at the problem the wrong way. You can obviously get a cost savings, like you can hire an engineer for half the cost in Latin, or in India, maybe even less than that. But focusing on like nearshore, like you can get a good engineer at half the cost, but you can get the top 0.001% engineer in an entire continent if you spend more than just like looking at it as a cost saving. And it's probably even going to be somewhat cheaper than a US based, and you're getting literally the best of the best of the best. So, and with that, a lot of benefits come in. So, when you're bringing someone that's, again, the top performer in a whole continent, you can expect a lot of cultural presets that you wouldn't find on your regular employee. So, like my teams, my nearshore teams had a work ethics that would beat even the CTOs. They would be working crazy hours. They would buy into the problem and only let go when that problem was solved. Again, wouldn't be afraid of any failures, wouldn't be afraid of discussing, because again, you're talking to the best. They've To become the best, you have to first start as the worst and then grow your way through that. And so you're getting people that has already gone through that whole process, and now they're able to deliver immense value for the dollar, like way more than just any other regular engineer, like US based or Canada based. Obviously there are exceptional US and Canada based engineers as well, but they would be on the top 0.1% of the paying curve. And that's the if you want to call it a compromise, that's where the compromise comes in. You're gonna pay something that for a nearshore engineer, so a Brazilian or Colombian, Argentinian engineer would be the top 0.1% salary, would still be something that for the US company is within the range of that level, so a senior engineer, but they would get the person that would cost 600,000-700,000 per year for that spot. And again, that all the cultural elements that come with it, I think Latam has another, I'll call it, we're usually warmer for people. And what I mean by that is we usually care a lot more. Not that's necessarily a good thing. I think that it's a balance of things, but that means that we legitimately would care for a problem being solved. And this would never be a 9 to 5 for any one of us, even if that's a job. Like even if the person's working in Brazil, they would like, that's kind of our culture. We would jump in, and I've seen a lot of them on the first week just jumping in and pulling all-nighters, even though they shouldn't, just because they want to hold the product, they want to hold the problem, and they want to solve it, like really solve it. I've actually had the opposite kind of discussions with my team. Usually you have to call in someone and say, hey, can you work late, or can you come in Saturday to help them? I literally had to tell people, stop, turn off your computer, stop working, take a break. Like, the problems are going to be there tomorrow. Like, just rest a little bit. And that's a lot of the culture that I see here in the Latin.
Yeah. And I'd imagine that's important, right? Because it's like you say, the first week we're going to pull all-nighters, not sustainable for a year, right? Or 2 years. And you do want to have that. You got to find that balance and sometimes help people find that balance, as we all know and like to do. So when you're collaborating with these teams across borders, across time zones, trust is a big thing. I think especially for a management that may be based in the US, first time using this type of, nearshore option. So how do you foster that trust, both, on the engineering side with the company that they're working with, and then specifically to, management teams that may be new to this, trying it out for the first time? Like, is there anything specific that you do that helps kind of that happen faster?
Yep. So I actually had 7 years ago, when I was at that startup, I had a great CTO, fractional CTO slash mentor. And he told me one phrase that I've never left my side ever since, which is trust but verify. And it's simple. It doesn't seem that much, but it's extremely powerful. So when you're creating a team culture, especially starting with a remote culture, but especially when you go to nearshore, the trust aspect is what keeps your engineering going, right? You need to give your engineering team autonomy. You need to give them the ability to take decisions, not wait for some top-down decision or anything like that. You only achieve that with trust. So the trust aspect is how I basically manage the team below me, but the verify is what keeps the stakeholders happy. So a good example that I'll do quite often, especially when new engineers are joining the team, they'll get a task, a subtask, something from Jira. They'll have some work to do. I'll let them be. I'm available for questions. They can come in and ask whatever they need. But and I also ask and I tell the team to help them as they need, but they're on their own. And then they'll submit a pull request and they'll have their code in GitHub or GitLab or whatever repository you're using. That's where I'll jump in and do the verify part. So, and it's very important to do the verify without hurting their autonomy and without showing up that you don't trust them. So usually if I find something that's not done the best way or it's just wrong, I'll either make a comment on the repository, but more often than not, I'll call them in and say, hey, how's your first couple of days going? I came across some code. Let's discuss and let's have like this kind of approach where it's not just like, okay, there is like a invisible Ariel looking behind my back and like getting all my mistakes. Now, like, I'll tell them I actually checked a couple of the commits and your pull requests. This is what could go better. And also asking the team, especially my senior engineers, to help. So it's not, again, the invisible Ariel, the force that's like all knowing. It's a team effort. And the same goes when I'm dealing with my leadership. So I also require trust to be able to operate because I am on the same settings, right? I am remote. I am a nearshore. They're not going to be looking at what I'm doing every day. And I usually create tools for them to verify my work. So that can be, give you one example. I wrote the entire engineering culture at one of my previous works. And the career ladder was based almost on like an RPG style career where engineers would grow points on specific skills. And when they have enough points on enough skills, they level up. Having that tool created and then shared with my leaders, in this case was directly to the CTO, and then have him follow up and be like, okay, so how's this engineering going? I'll literally open their skill sheet on this RPG style game and be like, this is how they were. This is where they evolved. Do you see these changes? Want to see some pull requests that they created that justify this, or want to talk to another engineer that they're mentoring and justify. So giving them the tools to verify gives them it feeds back into the loop and gives them more trust in me. That gives me more so they can verify and create this whole ecosystem.
Interesting.
And it feels like putting it in the context of a game for the engineers, I guess, makes it feel less like they're being reviewed.
Yes.
Right?
And it's extremely objective. And if engineers are one thing, is objective. So if you have a number in your communication and mentoring skills, you have 75 out of 100. They know how to act on it. It's very different than when you say, oh, you need to improve your communication skills. For an engineer, that won't work.
Yeah, so what does that
having
even
that very
mean?
Exactly. Yeah. Like I can talk, right? Like we're communicating.
Yeah.
Right, but the idea of getting your communication skills to go from like a 75 to like a 79, like that makes you feel, one, like you've accomplished something, like there's an incremental gain, and it's something quantifiable.
Exactly. And it also removes, so couple of fun facts that on this career ladder, it was actually on GitHub, so public for all engineers, and they could push pull requests. So if they believe that, okay, for a senior, Ariel had said you need to do A, B, and C, and they are like, oh, actually, it should be A, B, and D. They could push a pull request and then we'll review it. If the team agrees on it, that goes live. So they having that ownership as well helped them a lot, and it removed a lot of the even pressure that a lot of managers feel on like having to promote people. It was a clear threshold. It was a weighted average on all the scores that would have on each skill. And if the weighted average hit 130, 140, whatever the number we set, you're gonna be discussed for promotion. And if you're like at 160, we actually are late. You should have been promoted. And like I'm going to go to the management and be like, guys, we need to promote this person immediately. So it removes a lot of like the what's next and the pressure on my end to even try to keep them happy and satisfied and having a clear sight on what's gonna happen in the future. It's right here. Like here's your skill sheet. Like it's open. It's not something that I'm holding. Obviously, I wouldn't share with his colleagues or her colleagues, but within me and the person, it's open, discussable. On our one-on-ones, we would go over those sheets and make sure that everyone is aligned. We are in agreement on all those skill set points. So it made everything easier, really.
Nice.
Is that something that you're going to continue using?
Oh yeah, 100%. So I've actually created a template for my next role, and that's one thing I'm planning to push. Maybe even write something about it in the future, because it is kind of out of the outside the box thinking, but it's very powerful. Like I've had lots of success with that.
Yeah, it works.
And
So
I think
keep
it helps
going.
a lot of engineers or gamers.
Yep. Oh yeah.
Yeah, for sure. How can you kind of the flip side? Okay, so that's how you verify, right? You build the trust with management. On like the individual engineer side, they're remote in many cases outside of meeting like we are right now, on video. They may not ever meet the leadership in person. And if they do, it's going to be kind of rare, right? So how do you, is it super important first off? And then how do you try to make them feel, like they're part of the team, part of the culture, just as much as if they were going into an office every day in San Francisco?
Circling back to the first points, a lot has to do with matching with the product. And that alone and showing progress gives us, me as included, that sense of ownership that everything else becomes almost trivial, right? So as you get success and you see your customers succeeding and celebrating, everything else kind of dissipates. So it's still important. We'll have maybe virtual happy hours. We tried a couple of those. I've actually tried a couple of tools. One of them, but it was like a virtual workspace where you had like little avatars and people had computers that they will be working on and real time working on that. That helps in a little, like in some sense. But I think for me, the most important is literally belonging on the problem that we're solving. I've been into in-person settings and I've worked for more than half of my career on an in-person setting where I didn't see as people as united as solving an issue than I've seen just by having people agreeing that this problem needs solving and I can be a big part of it. And that's also a big part when you're building your team and the architecture of your team. You want to hire people that has that mindset, right? Like some people are more successful in different settings. The settings that I've found that work for me is having the team that believes very strongly on the product. Everything else comes as almost like a bonus of that initial mindset. And that means I've actually lost excellent engineers that wouldn't fit into that mindset. But in the long run, it's even better for them because we can't provide, like, we're not going to provide happy hours every Friday. It doesn't happen. It doesn't work like that in a remote setting, but we can provide some other types of satisfaction that the engineer would value more. The right type of engineer for this kind of team would value more as a whole.
And as you're bringing someone on, new, is it a requirement for you that they've done it before, the remote work?
It's not a requirement, but usually you can pick up on the first interview if they're able to or not.
Gotcha. And how would you go about that? Like, what are the tricks there?
So it's circling back, it's very linked to how they defend the product that they were building. So if I ask you what was the last project they were building, or like the one that you were most comfortable or most proud of it, you immediately see people that are genuinely happy and proud, like their eyes are gonna be glowing as they talk about this product. And someone that's like, oh yeah, we built this system. It was a very nice technical challenge, but it's kind of bland. And if that makes any sense,
you want to see
them
light up about the problem that they're either already solved, and
that's
you're
assuming they're early on indicator.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, it all keeps coming back to the same thing, right? Is like, are they excited about solving this problem?
Exactly. And that the remote setting becomes like something minor after that. If they're excited about it, they'll make it work. Like they will create their own routines, and they will, because they want to solve it, right? They want to be a part of it.
Yeah, and I think it's like you mentioned briefly before, is if it's working and they are solving it, right? It's like a sports team. Winning can cover up just about anything, right? So
exactly.
If you're having those wins and you're finding success, then I think that makes up for a lot of what you might be missing out in an office setting. And it'd be a lot better than losing together, where everyone's under the same roof. So is there maybe one thing that stands out to you that, as you come in and you're building these remote teams, you're working with people that may or may not have leadership anyways, that may or may not have done before. Is there something prominent that sticks out to you that is like wrong, that a lot of people believe to be right when it comes to remote engineering leadership? Getting back to your working with some people maybe that in management, on the management side of the house, that have never done any sort of nearshore engineering, right? And they're going to outsource their team. So is there maybe a prominent thought or even a lie, in your opinion, right, that people tend to believe about remote engineering leadership? Is there something that stands out as just like, this is not right?
Yeah. I've seen this often, actually, is that notion that if you are watching your engineer, they're gonna perform, and if you're not watching, they're gonna stop performing. I've seen this actually more than I would like to, even in an in-person space, like an in-person setting, where even the boss would try to get a desk next to their engineers just to be there and not to be part of it, and just like literally to watch and give them that fake sense of like, again, the invisible Ariel is watching kind of scenario. And this, I don't think this works very well on an in-person setting. This works very bad in a remote setting. Like that, at the core is trust, but verify. If you remove the trust, your engineers are gonna lose their will to become part of it. So one of the newest trends that I've seen that for me makes no sense is Microsoft Teams showing you're away if you're not touching your mouse for the past 10 seconds. That's bad, right? That just creates an environment for the manager where they believe they have the engineer work or the engineering team working full power or like full attention on it. And on the other hand, what actually happens is they'll create a script or they'll tie their mouse to their dog or something like that. So the mouse would keep moving. Uh, and they'll actually spend time and waste time trying to bypass that because engineering is a fun kind of profession. It's 100% brain, right? Like if you could hook a brain up to a computer and have that program, that would work almost as efficiently as a person. So the more this distraction you add to your team, the worse it's gonna be. And being like having them worry about the manager might get the manager happy and satisfied, but their team's efficiency is gonna drop significantly. So I that's why one of the main core values that I'll try to present to any manager or C-level that's starting a remote setting, especially a remote nearshore setting, trust. Let's work on your trust, and then we work on your verify. Because if you start with the verify and you get too close to it, then the trust is not there and everything falls apart.
An interesting question that kind of jumps off from something you just said right now. You said how, like, if you were able to hook up a brain and it'd be almost as good as a human. And I guess a question that kind of jumps into my head from that is like, an AI is almost that, right? It's almost a brain with no body. So in your opinion, I guess a two-part question, I guess then what makes the human better? And what role do you see for human engineers as AI gets better and better at kind of doing the thinking part, the kind of programming part of it?
Yep. And I've been thinking a lot about this, and a big chunk of it is the brain is not just the rational part, right? It's not just I get problem, I solve the problem, that's that. All that emotion, all that belief that you're solving a problem, you can't, at least on our current state, you can't really replicate that. And that plays a big part because usually the best technical solution is not the best solution, especially when you're dealing on a startup. You have to learn a lot before you get there. And the only way you can get the resilience to learn all of that is, again, with the failure and making mistakes and improving and learning from that, everything that we were just saying a little bit a while ago. The AI misses that whole part. At least, again, current state. I'm not going to be surprised if I see something amazing coming up in the next 5 years. The way I see the AI playing the role right now, it's actually, I like to call it a third arm, but it's more like a new piece attached to your brain, right? It helps you get a lot of speed. It does. It replaces a lot of the manual labor that I was doing 5 years ago. Now, instead of taking a month, it takes 5-10 seconds maybe. But that's it. That's just a tool that will just speed up the process. I don't see the brain just being, or the AI just being like that piece that replaces the whole human. It might. I've seen a lot of research actually creating specialized agents for specialized parts of the brain that's closer to how a brain works, right? So your brain is not one big mass that does everything. You have like the frontal cortex that processes some stuff. You have like your vision side, you have your hearing side, you have your memory side. So maybe going through with that rationale in the AI world, we can get something closer to a brain and maybe one day good enough, I'll call it. But right now, the state of AI, and especially when we're talking about LLMs, they're just that. They're language models. They're really good at understanding what you're asking, looking at a database set that they have and trying to come up with a solution without understanding anything that's related. It's just language, right? It's just like plain English, no emotions attached, no problems attached, no celebrating, no frustrating when the user fails to do an email one-time password. Like, it doesn't have all those aspects. And those are right now what I consider the most important skills of an engineer. It's not, again, it's not just coding. It's like the first question, like the product that makes you like fall in love with what you're doing. The AI won't have that answer, or they might have an answer, but that's not the answer.
Right. Oh, that's a cool perspective on it.
A lot of thinking about it in the
Yeah, no,
recent
I get
time.
it. I mean, like, from our end too, right? Like, as a company that kind of focuses on recruiting people,
Oh yeah.
the hardest communication problem that we have in really selling what we do, right, is having the customer, the potential clients, understand that we're not just bringing you a team, we're doing psychological work with the people so they can think beyond just the task that they're given, right? And I think that that is also kind of what sets us, and our engineers apart from an AI, right? Is like, we're not just going to be able to create the product, but we're thinking more holistically about the company, the goals, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that's where the value comes in.
Oh, and you touched a point that I've been seeing lately. Recruitment and I think it's taking the wrong turn, I think. Because, yeah, like there are a lot of candidates applying with AI, so there's a huge volume, a lot of companies reviewing that huge volume with AI. So it's like AI versus AI, and whoever gets the best AI gets hired, versus what you guys do, which is actually look at people. Like, engineers are people too, right? Like, they have needs, they have goals, they are sometimes happy, they're sometimes sad. Some things will make them go from sad to happy and vice versa. So removing the human out of the loop has taken the whole recruitment area, from what I've seen, into a black hole where now there are lawsuits against AI screening tools because they were doing stuff that they shouldn't be doing, or they're not transparent enough. I've heard from recruiters say, oh, my AI actually denies 30 to 40% of really good candidates just because something that a human would have got. And Holonic does an excellent job, in my opinion, finding the right person. And it's not just like getting to the triage, getting the person to talk to a human, but understanding that person and understanding, okay, will this person fit? This is gonna be the next big challenge on any engineering team. It's
Yep.
anyone can go in now and learn to code faster than it was for me 5 years ago, or for anyone 5 years ago. But getting the right fit, you don't learn that. Like, that's something that if you're gonna evolve that's gonna take years, and maybe not worth it because you're not the right fit for this job, but you're the right fit for the other job, so where you'd be happier and growing. I think that role that Holonic plays is huge. It is the next big thing, in my opinion, for all the recruitment and all the new career paths that are gonna that are gonna be developed.
Yeah. Well, thank you for the kind words. I was just going to say a lot of it comes not just on that side that you mentioned, Ariel, of, that we actually are human to human interfacing with these folks, because you can learn a lot from that. And we have a unique subset of questioning that we use as well, but it's on the client side. Like, we try really hard to understand who's hiring, what are you hiring for, so we can figure out if the people that we are talking to, circling it all back to what you've been saying this entire chat, are they going to be inspired, right? And are they going to really take this on and take this problem on? Is this something that they're going to be passionate about, or is it just another gig, right? And that's a huge, like, if you can find that and separate those things out. And in the current state, I'm with you. I don't think you can't do that with AI, especially if it's creating the resume and it's creating the intro letters, and it's just a bunch of noise, right? And so we help people filter through that and cut through that noise. I was talking to someone recently. They're like, we get up to 1,000, 2,000 applications when we put out a new position now. And most of it is AI trash. It's all the same, right? We'll get 10 hit at the same time. And it's just the same thing, right? With a different name. It's like, this is clearly auto-generated nonsense. But he's like, it takes us time. It takes our recruiters, right? We have to distill all this down. So that's why we say, hey, let us kind of cut through a lot of that and work through that for you. And then just bring you, the 3 to 5 absolute best candidates in our opinion. Then you make that decision. So
looking on the other side, on the client side, this makes a huge difference to the client, because one success on this means a lot. Like hiring one right person, especially when you're talking about smaller teams, is the difference between life and death, right? So it's not just like making it easier for them. It's literally making sure that they're going to be successful. And this is very valuable. I've gone through hiring the wrong person, and I've gone through hiring the right person. And I can't tell having someone that can just throw in, say, out of this 3, out of this 5, like I know out of those 2 or 3 are perfect for you. Just pick the best.
Yep.
That makes the difference between the startup or the scale up going broke or becoming very successful.
Awesome.
Yeah. That was the thing. I was just my 2 cents of the thing is like, I really feel that like nowadays it's with kind of AI resumes, AI interviews, you're ultimately hiring a piece of paper, not a person.
Yes.
And I think that really hurts a lot of companies that hire that way ultimately, because in the end, even if it's somebody that's using an AI, like you're still going to have to work with that human. And that human, to your point, Ariel, like earlier, is like, do they have that passion? Do they think that the problem is something important? And I feel like these are all nuances that, like, a friend of mine recently interviewed with a tech company, and their first interview was with an AI.
Yep.
Which, efficiency, I get it, but it blows my mind from a kind of like, what are you actually getting out of it? Right? You're not getting the best candidate, that's for sure.
The number of false positives that you get is absurd. Because, yeah, as you said, Franz, it's not the best candidate, it's the best AI handler. And that's usually not what the company needs.
Right. Again, it might work on a bigger company, maybe. But still, like, I would still put an asterisk into it. And you're saying this, like, I've actually talked to an AI interviewer on the phone the other day. I gave up because I had to repeat the same answer 3 times. It would keep asking, like, it got stuck, didn't get some keyword, and I left, literally. So, like, that company is never going to see me again, because I think there's both ways. I think there's going to be the false positive on the hiring side, where like you get the best AI players, and you get people that are just like, I want to talk to a human, right? Like, I'm not doing something small. Like, I'm like, this is my career. We're talking like, this is a place I plan to be a part of for the next 5 years, 10 years of my life. I need to see a human to see if I'm doing the right decision now and not in 3 years when I'm unhappy. Right.
Yeah.
So that's something, like, dealing with people, it's so important to have people. And again, circling back to Holonic, that's why I think what you guys are doing might not be seen right now as the huge value, just because the AI hype, and obviously you have to triage through 2,000 resumes, and that's, for a human, that's almost impossible. But once we go back to a place, well, when we see how this is failing, because it's starting to show that this is gonna fail, but it still has a lot of traction, then being the ones that are actually dealing with people, from like people with people, and not any hybrid AI, something with that, I think that's where it's gonna be shining and very evident. And okay, that this is the right way to do it.
Yeah. I feel like that the AIs can help, in terms of identifying skill gaps and maybe telling
Yep.
people how they did in an interview and
Yeah. Yep.
suggesting how to improve, but they're not the ones that can make the decisions.
Yes. It's a helper tool. It's just
Yep.
Yeah,
like in
the helping
tech.
tool, exactly. And I think that you're right. I feel like the way the state of things is now, I think everybody gets caught in the hype, right? You don't
Yes.
want to get left behind. You don't want to be the
Yep.
company that's not using AI to filter, and now you're going to miss on these candidates. But I feel like we are hitting an inflection point where ultimately these companies are going to have to come to terms with the fact that that is not the best way to do hiring. It's a
Yep.
faster way.
Yeah.
100%. It is a faster way, but it is not the best way.
And it's a faster way to filter as well. So
Yeah.
that's what they're not seeing yet.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I was just going to say, I feel like it affects the smaller companies more, right? Like a big company can have like a ton of failures and still be able to think, but a small company that uses these sorts of systems, they end up with not the right people. And that, to your point, right? Like what you have one person that is going to make or break this company. Do you really want to give the power to make that decision to somebody that's not a human? I don't know.
Yeah, I wouldn't.
We wouldn't recommend
I
it
was going to
either.
ask kind of
Yeah.
one question a little bit.
Exactly. Yes. I wouldn't recommend it as well.
Yeah. Kind of pivot to one other question here is that like kind of related to this, right? Because I've been talking about like how the engineering can hurt a small company, but not so much a big company, right? But I wonder, do you think that there are certain skills that engineers develop at smaller companies they don't develop at big companies that makes them much more valuable in a larger group? Like,
So
moving
yep.
up, right? Like, as you might be great for a small start, but what lessons do you really learn there that when you work for, a Salesforce, that the people that just had their whole careers in Salesforce, like, what are the skills that they don't have?
And that's also, if I may, one of the reasons I've seen a lot of exceptional engineers from this smaller startup ecosystem fail on larger ones. On a big company, like if you go to Salesforce, you're just one more. I can use my experience at Twitter. Like I worked in the marketing department at Twitter. Uh, Everyone asks me, "Oh, have you seen their code base? Have you like?" I've never even seen like I don't even know the name of the repository that the actual Twitter core was. Like I would focus on one little page and like marketing on Twitter, like a few components within that page, and that's it. So I'm not building anything. Well, first of all, I'm not building anything that I love. I think that was 10 years ago. So I actually liked the Twitter mindset back then. So it was a nice company to work. Like I believed on the company's purpose, but what I was doing, they could live without me easily. And that actually hit me very hard on like, okay, so what am I doing? And in contrast, if you're like even in a 50 engineer, 25 engineer team, so it's not super small, but usually they can't live without you. Like what you're making makes
Right.
such a big difference that you're actually adding to the whole value. And that kind of creates a reward loop that after you leave a smaller startup, you lack that. And that, again, that's why I've seen a lot of people fail on like going to Google or the FANG companies or anything like that. Because that reward loop, it's part of what makes a smaller scale startup engineer so valuable, so passionate, so fast, and even understand the trade-offs when he's building something. If the idea, like if we're building for speed or for quality, that's very connected to this reward feedback loop. And if you come from a bigger company, you definitely be lacking that because of the whole, again, you're just a small clog in a huge machine. And the opposite is also true. If you came from this background, trying to move to something, to a bigger company, that's usually going to be a very hard adaptation process, because you're, like, again, what you delivered a button. No one is going to mention you on the company monthly. Congrats, Ariel, you built that, or this is working. It's not happening, right? So, and back to the point, I think that's one of the key core features that I look for an engineer, someone that can work throughout this reward loop. That, and again, the reward loop needs to be something that you find relevant, that you're passionate about. I think that something that we touched a lot already.
Yeah.
But it is key to feed the whole engine and keep the person motivated.
Cool.
All right. Well, Ariel,
Yeah.
it has been a pleasure having you on today. We really appreciate you taking this time and sharing everything you know with us and with the audience. If someone wants to find you right now, where should they go look?
LinkedIn is probably the easier. It's just Ariel Ades. It's my name is pretty unique, so it's gonna be easy to find.
Excellent. Well, yeah, again, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Oh, that both ways. I'm really enjoyed this.
All right.
Me too.